Welcome. We are an affirming congregation. We have learned and studied, talked and prayed through the pandemic because becoming an affirming congregation was an explicit show of our belief that all sexual orientations, gender identities, and gender expressions are part of God's gift of diversity in humanity. It's a public affirmation to let the wider community know that we are a safe place, not only for LGBTQ, two-spirit, intersex, and asexual, plus refugees, immigrants, and Canadians, but also for their families, friends, and allies to find a place to belong and a home to worship in. We believe in God, light of the universe, source of love. We, as a community and congregation, have learned what it means to be public, intentional, and explicit about our affirmation of all people. We believe in Jesus, who taught us to love, who embodies justice and faithfulness, who journeys with us.
I had asked to have Adina's opening words shared with you because that is off our website. And it is a very important Sunday for us as an affirming congregation because it's our first Pride Sunday. And I've talked to some people who think, okay, we've done that, let's move on to what's next. So I wanted to take some time this morning to just talk about what it means to us in 2022 to be where we are in the larger context. I don't know if you've ever listened to something on the news and someone's asked maybe a politician or somebody about a situation as if it was a local situation. I heard somebody ask a politician about homelessness as if it was in Vancouver. It was at Vancouver. It could be Victoria and nowhere else. And this poor person got quite flustered trying to explain it. And I wanted to put my hand up and say, there's 7.5 million homeless people in North America. This isn't local to us. This is a much larger systemic problem. I feel a little echoey. And so I wanted to do the same kind of thing about pride because it's here in this congregation, as Adina referenced, we worked hard to attain the status of an affirming congregation. And our region, the province, did the same. And this year, when I was in Prince George, it was my honor to present, as one of the ministers of the newest congregations in British Columbia, it was my honor to present to the region their certificate, making them affirming. And so you could be tempted to think, whoa, isn't that great? We're really coming along well. And that's a little bit like saying, let's look at homelessness and just in our region and not larger. And that's what I wanted to talk about because we get used to pride. Now, I don't know, none of you got to meet my parents, unfortunately, because they were fabulous people. But when I was growing up, proud was not a good word. If somebody said, well, you must be proud of yourself, you didn't want to answer yes. You didn't want to say, yeah, I feel pretty good about what I just did, because that was never meant as an encouragement of self-affirmation. Pride was a very difficult thing. We felt proud, of course, of many things. I grew up in Ottawa. There were many times where you were proud to be a citizen, proud to be the daughter of a veteran, etc. That was okay. But proud of yourself, that was a slippery slope for us. That sense that it could lead to, bloated self-esteem and bad things would happen. It was important to keep that pride in check. So now the word pride is used in the very opposite way. And that actually is a profoundly familiar place for us as Christians. The word Christian, for example, is not how the first generation described themselves. They called themselves disciples or followers of the way. They probably could name who they were by first name on one or two hands. It was their opponents, and I think it was in Antioch, who called them Christians as a sneering criticism. Like, oh, they follow Jesus, they follow him. So they grabbed that. They grabbed that name and said, yeah, that's us. That's us, we're the Christians. So they took the hostile word, flipped it, and slapped it on the first century equivalent of a t-shirt. That's not the only time they did that. The other thing is with the cross. Now, the cross is not as central, perhaps, to our thinking, but for a while, as a culture, it was the most recognized graphic in the world. It's now been replaced by the golden arches. But the same thing, it was a torturous death that Jesus died. And instead of saying, oh, well, we can't even think about that, that's just such a terrible thing, they grabbed it and they said, yes, yeah, that's how Jesus was killed. And many of us wear them to this day. So what had been meant to be to silence was grabbed and held on, and so we became Christians wearing crosses. And some of my younger friends who don't wear jewelry have them as a little line tattoo. So today, we're celebrating pride, a word that, if you're a boomer like me, was difficult. And in fact, if you're a boomer like I am a boomer, when we were in junior high and high school, anything that was identified or seen to be in any way outside a quite narrowly defined norm was scorned, like the early Christians were scorned. And so you think about what would those people that was our own generation 30 years ago or 40 years ago. So what is it today? So have we reached this point of acceptance? I think there's 39 out of the countries. There's 53 countries in the Commonwealth. 36 still have homosexualities against the law in the Commonwealth. When the United Church began to ordain self-declared practicing homosexual persons, 1988, there was tremendous opposition. You would remember that if you were part of the church in those days. And it centered around a group called the Community of Concern. They left in droves. There's some estimates that 1/3 of our congregations were lost. Some congregations entirely left. Others had very little impact. That was in the middle 80s. This is 2022. Last week, the Christian Reformed denomination in the States voted not to recognize same-sex marriage, not to ordain or license people who were publicly, explicitly homosexual. The United Methodist Church, though, more closely aligned with us, the largest Protestant denomination in the States, is now undergoing the kind of split that we went through in the 1980s, that the conservative congregations are leaving, and right now, I'm afraid I forget the name they've given themselves. So we have been working away here, but let's not get in a bubble and think that there aren't people like us across in denominations much like ours, suddenly realizing that they will never be ordained. People went to fine universities. So where is Jesus in the midst of all this? I can remember in the 1980s in the United Church, people would print booklets called, "What Did Jesus Say About Homosexuality?" Of course, they were cheap to print because you didn't have anything to put on the inside pages, just white paper. But of course, hidden in plain sight, all the testaments, old and new, they knew about other lifestyles, other ways of living, other sexualities. And in the midst of all of that knowledge, Jesus says something that's of tremendous hope for us all, regardless of what we're thinking, which is Jesus said, "As I am one with the Father, you are one with me, and we are all one." That we would all be one is, in fact, the Latin on the crest of the United Church of Canada, that all would be one. And that includes people that have a different way of living than we do. It's not a thought that we would all be one and therefore we'll all be identical. The great thing about belonging to a progressive church is we don't even have to pretend that we all agree what heaven looks like, for example. We know that there's big controversy. We disagree about a lot of things. We agree about the absolute centralities. The majority of us who are in this denomination, drawn still to the teachings of Jesus, It's not just an afterlife philosophy that attracts us, but a lived in the moment, here and now philosophy that attracts us. Not just because it's what our family did, because we know that is no longer the case, but that individuals are choosing to find joy in the fact that Jesus wants to claim us all as family and encourages and challenges us to do that. So now we invite all people. Now, every church has always said that all are welcome, and we've known it's never literally been true and never perhaps was intended to be so. But we are working hard to say all are welcome. We're working hard to reduce barriers of every type to what is going to be here, what is going to be in the United Church of Canada, especially in British Columbia. So all of you are welcome, and I heard this in a sermon and I loved it so much, I hope I get it right. All of you are welcome, and all of you is welcome. That's good. I like that. All of you is welcome. And on this Pride Sunday, our first one as an affirming ministry, we give thanks for the people who went before, who made it possible, but also a shout out to every person who walks by, who has no intention ever of coming into this church, who says something encouraging to us about our slogan on the board, or our rainbow steps, or our Love is Love banner. Who knows whose heart we are encouraging by simple acts of solidarity and love? That all may be one is our encouragement this week. Amen.